Jimmy Butler can't be solved as the Heat continue their magical, improbable run with great performances from Jimmy and many more, especially in the fourth quarter. And yet another huge win on the road that has the Miami Heat on the verge of a trip to the NBA Finals. We break it all down today's playoff edition of Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Good morning and welcome to a live edition of Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat. I'm Wes Goldberg here with David Ramil. However you might be tuning in on YouTube or your favorite podcast app, thanks so much for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Birddogs. Go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNBA. And when you enter the promo code LockedOnNBA, they're going to throw in a free custom Birddogs Yeti-style tumbler with your order. Going live on YouTube on a Saturday morning after the Miami Heat went into Boston. And David, after taking a game one on the road, snatched game two on Friday night, coming back from 12 points down in the fourth quarter, closing out the game on a 34-16 run. Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo, they're huge down the stretch. We're going to hand out credit cookies later on. We'll get to your questions later on. But the Heat now have a 2-0 lead in these Eastern Conference Finals. Teams that have gone up 2-0 in a best-of-7 series have gone on to win that series 92.2% of the time. David, Jimmy Butler, huge. Bam Adebayo, enormous. Gabe Vincent hitting big shots. The Heat are up 2-0 and probably going into Boston, the number 2 seed, the heavy favorite, 97% chance of advancing to these finals. And it's the Miami Heat that have absolute control of this series. Where do you want to start with this?
Just the improbability of it all. I think we can talk certainly about Jimmy Butler and the classic battle with Grant Williams. The one-sided battle, it was David and Goliath, except this time Goliath won. It was
Goliath
incredible.
Crushed him.
Yeah. Careful who you talk to, Batman. It was an incredible game. And just I'm watching the game, as I was mentioning to you before we started recording, just the incredible improbability of everything that, you're watching this game and they've got this 12-point lead in the fourth quarter and they're at home and their backs are against the wall. And yet somehow Miami says, no, we're the ones with a sense of urgency. We're the ones that understand what's at stake here. We can't afford to let this game slip through our fingers. And they went and took it, punching Boston in the mouth along the way and saying, we're the better team here. Forget your number one picks. Forget all of our undrafted players. Forget the tired narratives and forget Banner 18. We want this right here, right now. Game 2 in Boston. Let's effing go. And it was a really incredible moment from the Heat there to watch this happening. And then, led by who else? Jimmy Butler. You think you've got the answers. You put Grant Williams in there. He provides his spark. He does what he does. It doesn't really boil down to one player. But then part of what gets him going as a player on the Celtics side of things is to be able to talk smack, be a little chippy, throw a couple elbows, be physical. You picked the wrong guy to go against, and Jimmy Butler. That's unfortunately the way it was for you. But, Jimmy Butler is just that good. He is that dog. He wants these moments. He relishes them. And he said, you know what? Oh, you want to talk? Let's see what happens. Let's see who actually puts it out on the court.
Yeah, let's just start. Yeah, let's start there. That's a good place. And then we can kind of get into the bigger picture stuff. But Jimmy Butler in that fourth quarter, 9 points on 4 of 8 shooting. He finishes with 27 points, 8 rebounds, 6 assists, 3 steals, 2 blocks. I mean, he is just doing everything out there. He's been the best player on the court. Jason Tatum has not made a field goal in the fourth quarter in this entire series yet. They throw Grant Williams on Jimmy Butler after Grant Williams doesn't play at all in game one. And it doesn't work. You mentioned the little confrontation that they had forehead to forehead, getting chippy. TNT cameras and microphones pick it up, him walking up the court. There's no way they thought that was the answer. Jimmy Butler staring right into the camera, saying that, shaking his head. No. He knew, just like Tobias Harris over me. He knew that they were going to hear that. Jimmy asked after the game about that. And it was so funny listening to Jimmy Butler talk about it because he starts, typical player post game, kind of trying to downplay it a little bit. He's talking, and he starts smiling a little bit more. And he goes, And he goes, yeah, it's a spirit of competition, blah, blah, blah. And then he goes, but I'm probably not the right person to talk to. And that's how he ends it. And he's got that big bleep eating grin at the end of that answer. You could just tell he's getting fired up just talking about it.
He's the proverbial cat that eating the canary, and we're all watching it happen. It's amazing. Like he knows he's so in control of these moments. It's incredible to watch it. Again, I know we'll expand on the big picture, but even as it's happening and he sees what's going on, Grant Williams thinks he has the edge. He thinks he's firing up the Boston crowd. The Celtics fans are eating this up. It's great playoff basketball and intensity and everything else like that. And Jimmy just goes, okay, let's hold the brakes. No one on this court is better as a player than
I am a Celtics fan.
Yeah,
I am so pissed at Grant Williams. Like this is it's the same thing.
It's hard,
like
right?
It's the same thing Dylan Brooks did against LeBron. It's like, who are you? Like, cool. No, you've been to a few conference finals. You've been to an NBA finals, but what exactly have you won? And these people that come in, they start trash talking.
It's a gamble, though,
the best player. It's what do you think if you're Grant Williams? You think you're going to shake? You're going to rattle Jimmy Butler in that? What would give you the impression that was going to work based on anything that we know about Jimmy Butler?
They're up 12, team, right?
The most rattled. I guess, but like the most. So yeah, you're up 12 already. Just chill. Like hold on to that 12-point lead. Like why are you trash talking in that moment? Like why would you do that? If I'm his teammates, I'm pissed at Grant Williams. And by the way, Grant Williams' teammates get pissed at him a lot.
Jaylen Brown. You see Jaylen Brown asked about it, and he's like, next question.
What do you say?
Next question. Yeah, he was asked at the podium, do you think that Grant Williams might have inspired Jimmy Butler, his performance? He goes, next question.
No, you got next question. Oh, my God.
Yeah.
I am so mad. I'm the Celtics fan. I am so mad. And to go back to the fourth quarter run. So, yeah, the Celtics, by the way, were up 12. They had a 12-point lead in the second quarter. The Heat come back. They take their 54-50, 4-point lead in halftime, and then they're back up. The Heat are back down 12 in the fourth quarter. And I'm watching this game, and I'm thinking, okay, it was a good run. The Heat came back. They had a push. Right. But this makes sense, right? Like, you're in Boston. The Celtics are so talented. They're so good. You already got game one. This makes sense that the Celtics would just kind of have this late push. Maybe Jason Tatum makes a couple shots down the stretch, and the Heat, they don't good effort.
Close, hard-fought effort.
You're not going to go into Boston and go up 2-0. Like nobody expected that. Nobody, right? And so it sort of made sense that the Celtics would pull away, and then the Heat would come back, having done what you had to do, get one on the road, like they did in every series that they've won in these playoffs. You get one on the road, you come back to Miami, and you take care of home court advantage, and you end up pulling out maybe perhaps even the entire series. But then Grant Williams does that to Jimmy Butler. Jimmy Butler gets fired up. Him and Bam just go crazy down the stretch. And a couple big shots and big free throws by Max and Gabe and all these other things.
Yep. And
I'm just watching this game, and the seconds they expire. There's no more time left. Game 2's over, and the Heat win. And I'm just like, how? I'm still having a hard time comprehending the Heat being up. I read the stat earlier. 92% chance, 92% of the time, a team with a 2-0 lead in a best-of-7 series goes on to win that. The Heat are the number 8 seed, David. I don't know that we mentioned that enough, or that the TNT broadcast mentions it enough. And I'm being facetious when I'm saying that. This is I know I'm starting to ramble here, but I'm still having a difficult time comprehending what it is that the Heat have and the opportunity that they have created for themselves here.
It is absolutely unbelievable. We've never witnessed anything like this. We've made the comparison before, obviously the 1999 Knicks being able to get to this point. And I've started to see some more people fall in line with what we talked about after they eliminated the Knicks. The fact that was somewhat different than this
very different
particular instant, because that was a strike shortened season, a lockout shortened season, and they only wound up playing a handful of games. That 8-seeded Knicks team wasn't really an 8th seed. This was over the course of a full 82-game season. Miami in the play-in tournament.
There was a 6-win difference between the Knicks as an 8th seed and the number 1 seed. The Celtics won 14 wins and 13 wins. I mean, Milwaukee was the team that had 58 wins. Boston had 57. There's 13 wins difference in the regular season between these Celtics and these Miami Heat. And the Miami Heat went into Boston and acted like they were the big brother. They went in and said, no way. We're going to come into your town. We're going to come into your house. We're going to steal your lunch money. We're going to eat your sandwich right in front of you. And then we're going to go back. And by the way, we got 2 more games to play in Miami.
Yep.
It's wild. All right. We're going to do credit cookies next. I know we're going to talk about Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo specifically. What did they do in the fourth quarter? And I have one credit cookie that I have to give out. And this player didn't even really have a great game, but I feel compelled to give some cookies to this specific player. But we're going to talk about that next. But first, today's episode of Locked On Heat is brought to you by our friends at Birddogs. I look better and I feel great wearing Birddogs. It's true. Their stretchy fabric makes my legs look great. They're comfier than my other shorts. They're comfier than my other pants. They give me the freedom to wear one pair of shorts on the golf course, to a meeting, a date, hanging out with friends, by the pool. Just one pair of shorts all day long, no matter the setting. I was literally just wearing a pair of Birddogs. They sent us a bunch of them, David, a couple pairs the other day, and they're great. I love the new colors, but I already had a pair of Birddogs before that, and I was wearing them like a few days before they sent us the stuff. By the pool, had a cigar, a cocktail on an off day for me, and just 90 degrees out, Miami classic. Jumped into the water, cooled off, went back out. And with the fabric, they just dry up, and I'm not having to change throughout the day. Those were the shorts that I wore for the rest of the day. Super comfortable, look great to hang out in. So go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNBA when you enter the LockedOnNBA. They're going to turn a free custom Birddogs Yeti style tumbler with every order, and they sent those to us as well. So check it out, birddogs.com/LockedOnNBA. Back here with Locked On Heat. Thanks again for making us your first listen every day, David. It's time to get into the kitchen. It's time to whip up some credit cookies. The Heat up 2-0. What kind of cookies are we handing out on a Saturday morning? You know what? We earned it, man. Saturday morning cookies. Why not?
Like a breakfast biscuit of some kind, something really appropriate for the mini. Yeah, exactly. A little dip in your coffee there. I think that's appropriate. Yeah.
Maybe something with a little coffee right here.
Yeah, I just finished off mine, but it's just unbelievable. We're here Saturday morning, hours after the win, and I keep reliving the sense of shock. And I know, again, we talked about the fact that this is no ordinary 18, and we've seen magical moments throughout this postseason run. But the fact that they were able to go to Boston, you just cannot overstate enough how important that was. The look on those Celtics fans' faces, they had no idea what they had witnessed. There was a look of shock and horror and just complete inexplicability about it as they're watching this, as Jimmy and the rest of the Heat are celebrating and the Celtics players walk off the court. Unbelievable moment. And
I don't want this to be taken as dancing on a grave, because nothing's done yet, right?
Nothing.
Like we saw the Clippers come back from a 2-0 lead against Dallas in 2021 in those playoffs. Like this can happen, right? Just because I read that stat means it doesn't mean anything. And the Celtics are super talented. And if they just start making a bunch of threes, and they were shooting 40% from 3-point range coming into this, like nothing is done yet. What I think you and I are trying to express here is just the sheer improbability of what it is that is right in front of us. The Heat, as the number 8 seed, going into a very talented Boston Celtics team's house and taking the first 2 games. Like I said, you just don't see this, right? No. You just expect the Celtics. Game 1, yeah, sure. Yeah, we've seen that already a bunch of times in these playoffs by the Miami Heat and other teams, right? But to take both is so improbable. And that's just as a fan of the sport, right? I'm not even talking about as a fan of the Heat, just a fan of the sport. The sheer improbability of what it is that we're seeing, right? We got on here and just said, like, we broke down the odds that FanDuel had. We broke down the 97% ESPN analytics, the 538 stuff. And I'm looking at them, I'm like, I got no problem with this. I still picked Heat in 7 going into this series, but I didn't have a problem with other people picking the Celtics. I wasn't out here. It made sense, right? Like we just said, 13 wins difference. The net rating for the Celtics way more than where the Heat were in the regular season. Like all of this stuff made sense. And so for them to be up right now 2-0, just the improbability of it is what I think you and I are sort of geeking out over right now.
Yeah. Has Miami captured the hearts of NBA fans? Because I
think so.
It's certainly starting to change that way. Like the disrespect, the lack of any kind of accountability or credibility in terms of the coverage and things of that sort, it seems to be gone now. Just the fact finding a way to do this.
I'm sorry, but to cut you off, but you mentioned that, and I was getting text messages from former colleagues that I used to cover the Warriors with, right?
Sure,
and
sure.
they're all texting me like, "You're covering
What?
the best story in sports right
Yeah,
now," and I was like, "I
yeah.
know, this is crazy." And obviously, my Warriors friends are no longer covering playoff series, and nobody thought that you would be that the Miami Heat would be here, that you and I would be doing podcasts like this on May
Hence why
20th,
you're in
right?
Chicago right now.
Right, exactly. And so let's get into these cookies here. We got to start with Jimmy Butler. We've talked so much about him already. 27 points, 8 rebounds, 6 assists, 3 steals, 2 blocks, just packing the box score. Incredible night for him. We could start with the cookies for him, but I want to also talk about Bam Adebayo because I think he was so important. 8 points, 8 rebounds, and 4 assists in that fourth quarter to close that game out. He finishes with 22 points, 17 rebounds, 9 assists. I'm going to go ahead and just give him the triple double. I don't care. I'm just going to do it. I think we have that kind of leniency here.
3 apiece for them, I think is probably fair.
Specifically with Bam, him attacking the switching of Boston's defense, picking his spots, finding when Al Horford would drop, when they wouldn't switch, or when he had that matchup. He was so aggressive. It was so important for the Heat.
The game slowing down, even at this point in the season for him, just seeing where Horford is, where Robert Williams is, where anybody's guarding him, recognizing exactly at what speed to attack the basket. I got to be honest with you, it felt very Jimmy-esque almost. Like Jimmy is not the most explosive player, but his sense of timing, regardless of if it's Brogdon or White or Tatum or Brown, whoever's on him, his ability to get to the hoop because he just has this innate timing of how to cut and when to use his physicality. Bam starting to implement that against a good defender in Al Horford, who really limited, who already limited a very good MVP in Joel Embiid in the previous series, and Bam is making him look he's making him look old. Like Bam's just more aggressive. And the rebounding, especially in that fourth quarter, like I'm watching the game with a friend of mine, and we're just like in shock because not only is this aggressive Bam in terms of his offense and scoring, but the timeliness of his rebounding, despite the fact that he's undersized, going against guys like Horford, etc., is unbelievable. That dunk he had on the missed Jimmy pull-up from the baseline, the rebound on the other side when it was within minutes there, it was a missed three-pointer, I want to say, from Tatum or Brown, and he corrals it, stretching that left arm back as far as he could possibly go, almost to midcourt, to pull down that rebound. He would not be denied is what I kept seeing from him yesterday. A really strong statement from Bam.
Eric Spoelstra challenges Bam Adebayo with those quote-unquote grown man rebounds, right? He challenges him. He's like, hey, we need a few of these from you every single game. And like you said, he's in these first 2 games, his rebounding on the defensive end is so important. The Celtics, I can't remember what they shot from 3-point range in game 1, but it wasn't good.
Oh, yeah. No,
and in this one, it was 28.6. They went 10 for 35 from 3-point range. So important when they are missing those 3-pointers is getting those long rebounds, those tough rebounds, right? And ending that defensive possession for Miami. You're keeping those runs going that have been so important in these first 2 games for the Heat because the Celtics have had their runs, right?
Yep.
And that, in fact, that's kind of what they were talking about from the Celtics perspective post game is like, hey, we've had runs. It's just about sustaining those runs. But a big part of ending those runs and creating your own runs for the Heat and kind of flipping the games the way that they have is just been ending those defensive possessions. When it is that the Celtics do miss shots, getting that defensive rebound and getting to the end of the floor, Bam has been so important pushing off of those defensive rebounds. So the fact that he had 17 of them yesterday, or 15 defensive rebounds, 17 total rebounds, it's not just the defensive rebounding part of it. It's sort of the totality of it all, right? Grabbing the rebound, going down the other end of the court, either scoring in transition, finding teammates, and other things. So 3 apiece to Jimmy and to Bam Adebayo. I think it's fair to say even, again, Tatum, it's been disappointing fourth quarters, but he had 34 points in this game. Yep. So I'm not ready to say that Bam has been the second best player in this series, but has he been? Like,
it's a good argument because I think you look at what he does on all other aspects in terms of playmaking, his defense, and on top of the scoring and the fact that Miami's up 2-0, you could make a strong argument. They might be even money at this point. Again, this isn't, I made the point that Jimmy is the best player, and some people criticize that. It's not that they're the best player during the regular season. Nobody cares. It's right now. It's what he's done during the playoffs. It's what he's been able to accomplish during the first 2 games.
These first 2,
Yeah, Tatum is down 0-2, and he's withered in big moments. I think Celtics fans would agree that's the case. I know he was inserted at late in the fourth quarter, and maybe they could have used him to play the whole second half. But I was a little surprised. I did notice that I was a little surprised to see that run from Jimmy, not because we haven't seen this from him before, but he did look gassed. Like in the third quarter, he was like hunched over, drawing air. He was just breathing heavily. Yeah.
Grant Williams.
He's like,
does
okay.
Grant Williams get a credit cookie?
No.
Let's do it. No, I think we should. That's hilarious.
A naked cookie. Yeah. Okay. All right.
Grant Williams gets a cookie.
Thank you, Grant
Williams gets a cookie. Yes.
He found another level.
He's been much more helpful to the Miami Heat than he has been the Boston Celtics.
That's fair.
Congrats to Grant Williams, the first ever team from the player from the opponent to get a credit cookie. Congratulations, Grant Williams. Keep doing it, man. Keep doing it. We'll give you cookies all series. All right. So we've got what do we do?
Let's talk about Caleb Martin. That's 7.
You want to do Caleb Martin? Okay, let's do Caleb Martin. 25 points in this game, 11 of 16. He had 14 or 15 points by halftime. 12 points in that second quarter when the Heat came back from the first 12-point deficit. Just enormous in this game, Caleb Martin was.
Yeah, hitting that jumper. 4 points in the fourth quarter, too. Just really, really good. A sense of attacking. Just the incredible transformation from him, from a guy last year who was just this infectious energy, always diving for the ball, breaking up passing lanes, swarming in for a dunk, etc., or a big block shot. And now his touch around the basket. I mean, we've seen it evolve over the course of the regular season, but for fans that maybe haven't seen him as much, he is just unbelievable the way he's finishing around the rim. Like every time he's laying it up, he's got this George Gervin-like ability to finish at the rim now with that finger roll. It's unbelievable, this touch around the hoop. But even still, like he has just found seams. He's found ways to break down Boston's defense. Nobody expected him, at least nobody on the Celtics side expected him to have this kind of an impact. But
I didn't expect him to have 25 points.
No, that's even outsizing our expectations. Yeah. But I'm just saying, like again, the narrative, the conversations, the idea that Boston was so much better because of their depth and everything else. They haven't had a bench player even close to approximate what Duncan Robinson and Caleb Martin did yesterday. So, I mean, I think it was widely overstated.
Big difference between PJ Tucker in that role last year and Caleb Martin, right? Where the Celtics last year put Robert Williams on PJ Tucker, but had obviously Williams play off of him the way that the Celtics always do that. They'll put him on a non-offensive threat. And then have him kind of crowd the paint, right? And again, when another challenge that Spoelstra had for his players, it was a challenge on Caleb Martin to attack that in a way that, look, we love PJ Tucker around these parts, but
absolutely,
what Caleb Martin has done at that position is just so much more dynamic. And with Robert Williams sagging off of him in this game, kind of giving him the PJ Tucker treatment, Caleb Martin said, "All right, bet." And he put the ball on the ground. He attacked the basket relentlessly, like you said. He always. I can't remember where it was. Was it the Barry Jackson? Maybe had like he was talking to a scout about some of the Heat role players and was talking specifically about Caleb Martin. Yeah. I'm pretty sure it was a Barry Jackson piece, and I apologize if I got that one wrong. But said that Caleb Martin just makes such great decisions.
Yep.
Especially when he puts the ball on the ground, and sometimes you don't really know what's going to happen. Like he loves to attack baseline. Caleb Martin does. And he just ends up somehow. You're like, where is this going?
Through,
and then he just sort of ends up at the basket making a layup or a dunk or something like that. And it just sort of tends to work out for him. And, he's super athletic, and I think that's a big part of it. But he does make good decisions, and he's aggressive. And Spo has challenged him to say, okay, if Robert Williams is going to sag off of you, go be a 25-point per game player. Like, go do it. Like, he's giving you the space. He's giving you the leeway to do it. So cookies to him as well. I think we have 2 more cookies to give out. Let's do it.
I know who you want to give one to. I know you want to give one to
Gabe
Vincent.
Gabe Vincent. He was 9 points, 2 of 8. Kind of a rough game for him on the offensive end. But we talk about this. The chutzpah, the cojones.
This is for our YouTube viewers. Yeah. He's got the tenacity. That's what it is, basically. Yeah. I was watching that when he had that mid-range jumper late in the fourth, and I just looked over at my friend and said, that took balls. Like, that was tough to hit that shot at that point in time, because again, so much on the line here, and for him to pull up, I mean, he's going to make himself some money this offseason. Of that, there's no doubt. But he had big moments contributing, and it late in the game, it wasn't like he had a monster game or anything like that. But
he was 1 of 8 at that point before he snakes around that pick and roll. And by the way, he doesn't really play pick and roll like that. That was more like Kyle Lowry to kind of snake it and kind of go from one side of that painted area to the other. And he gets Jason Tatum right on him. Like, that's not the switch you're looking for. Tatum's bigger than you. He's a good defender. That is not the switch that you're hunting for. And he's doing this, and he's kind of slowly kind of going through that pick and roll. I'm like, is he about to shoot this? There's no way. There was like 17 seconds on the shot clock still or something. And then he pulls up from 19 feet and just drains that shot and probably the dagger, I would say, in that game. Yeah. It was a little bit
It was backbreaking. It was backbreaking. Like, you're
Backbreaking.
watching that, it's like, God, Gabe Vincent's going to crush us now. It's one thing for get Jimmy fired up, Bam pulling down these boards, etc. But Gabe Vincent's going to start knocking down middies in our face like that. What choice do we have? What can we do but watch it and take it and just hope for a better game 3? That's on the Locked On Celtics side. Go listen to John Corrales talk about what's going to happen next. But as far as Miami and everything they were able to accomplish tonight, incredible. We should talk about Max Strus. I mean,
and Duncan Robinson. I know.
Can we split a cookie between Max Strus and Duncan Robinson? Completely different players making their impact in different ways. But Duncan, some big 3-point shots, but also some great off-ball cutting, driving to the rim, baseline cuts, etc. Just impacting the game that way. And then Max, another solid defensive game from him, and the 3-point shooting. He doesn't need a lot of space to get that shot off, but when he knocks it down, again, those were big shots throughout the course of the game to help Miami either close the gap or be able to, just cut the deficit to a slight degree there. It was impressive games for both of them.
5 of 11 combined for them from 3-point range, which was huge. The Heat shooting 34, almost 35% in this game from 3-point range. So the 3-point shooting came back for the
league average. All right.
Hey, that's
all you need.
Saying that's all we needed, right? Like that's all that he needed was you didn't need to shoot 40% like you did against, or 45% like you did against the Bucks. Like that, you didn't need that. You just needed a healthy Jimmy Butler. You needed an aggressive Bam Adebayo, and you needed to just shoot not 30% the way that you did against the Knicks. That wasn't going to work against the Celtics, and we were right. We were absolutely right. It's not like the Heat are blowing out the Celtics. They had to come back from 12 points in the fourth quarter. They just need about what it is that they've gotten in these first 2 games. Now the Heat are up 2-0 in this series. What can the Celtics do to try to get back into this series when this goes back to Miami? What do we expect for them? Is Grant Williams the answer? There's no way they thought that was the answer. We're going to talk about that next here on Locked On Heat. Thank you for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Everydayers, we're going to be back Sunday night with a recap of Game 3. David and I will be in Miami from the arena. Very much looking forward to that. But this question comes in from Brian talking about that Game 3. What adjustments do the Celtics have left at this point other than starting Derek White for Robert Williams? Are they down to just Jason Tatum having to play better in the fourth quarter and shooting better from 3-point range? Let's talk about that first adjustment. Joe Mazzulla going back to Derek White in that starting lineup in place of Robert Williams in that second half, David. I thought it was just a matter of time. That has been Joe Mazzulla's comfort zone all regular season long. He's gone away from that double big lineup for most of the season, went back to it to close that Sixers series. It seems like he's going back to that. Do you think that's going to be the starting lineup in Game 3 with Derek White, 3 guards in place of Robert Williams to start?
I do. I think as much as the Celtics players were comfortable with the idea of Williams starting, and they all talked about following the series against the Sixers and the last couple wins there, I think there's a recognition that they need to do something different. And they don't have any other answers. It's not like Miami doesn't have any answers either, but they don't need to. They're not asking any questions. They're trying to figure out how to close this out as soon as possible, because on the Boston side, it's like you had your idea that Grant Williams would provide a spark. He did. He also provided a spark for Miami. So that didn't work out quite the way you wanted to. Like, you don't have anything else. Who are you going to go to? Peyton Pritchard, Sam Hauser? Like who else is on that bench? Blake Griffin? There is nobody else there. There's nobody that's going to provide any other kind of spark or change the dynamic. What are you going to do? Double, triple Jimmy? Are you going to pressure Caleb Martin? Like, I mean, everybody's been defending as well as possible, but Miami's just finding a way to move the ball, be more effective, pull down bigger rebounds. Miami's deeper, better. They've just been the better team. So for the Boston side of things, I don't think there is another change they can do other than try to
play better.
The starting line. Yeah, change the starting lineup,
change the starting,
and maybe shoot better. What else you got?
Maybe, right? But the Heat, look, I guess that would be one way to do it, right? Is to just try to get out to an early lead, go smaller. Kevin Love played 14 and a half minutes in this last game. Didn't play a whole lot down the stretch when Boston mostly went small. But like I said, the Heat could just, all right, we'll put Caleb Martin at the 4. The Heat tend to close that way anyway. Right. If I would be interested to see if the Celtics did go with Derek White in place of Robert Williams, would the Heat still go with Kevin Love in that starting lineup? I think they would. I don't think that they would be the team to change things, but I think they would be quick to just sort of be like, all right, you know what? Let's just go to Caleb Martin here at the 4. Yeah, they were. And so I don't know that if I'm Boston, though, I don't know. I think I would just stick with Robert Williams. Like, I think that if you're the Celtics, the answer is sort of like, okay, we got to rebound better. We got to make more shots and all these other things. But the Heat have just been so much more physical than the Celtics is the thing that really has stands out to me in these first two games. They're the team getting the loose balls, right? They're the team getting the 50. They're diving on the floor. They're getting they're boxing out. They're getting the rebounds and all those things. And I don't know that going smaller necessarily is how you sort of even that. Unless you're just going to try to outshoot the Heat, which I suppose the Celtics have the talent to do it. They've got a ton of shooters. I guess that could be the way to go. But
you remember that what started off this great season for Boston and how they looked like a world beater to start off the season. Their offense was incredible. They had one of the top offenses in the league, etc. And it was their passing. And in moments throughout games 1 and 2, we've seen that passing. But other than that, it hasn't really been all that effective. A lot of ISO ball. Miami won the assist total yesterday in game 2. Like they just kind of got away from what got them to this point. And Tatum and Brown both are saying, as stars and NBA players often do, they want to be the one to take over the game, to hit that big shot. They've gone ISO a lot, and that's kind of stagnated their offense. And so, you know what? That's what are you going to do? Like that, they have to either change their style, go back to what got them here in the first place early in the season by moving the ball more, or they have to start knocking down those shots. There's nothing else to it.
Justin Gonzalez writes in, Max is harassing Jason Tatum all night. And I think that was also the case in game 1. Just huge defensive possessions. In game 1, I know we're talking about Max Strus at the end. Jason Tatum gets Strus on that isolation, gets him on the switch, and just he's like, okay, this is the matchup that I was trying to hunt. I got Strus. And he tries to get to the basket, and Strus just holds him up right there at the top of the nail. And Tatum is forced to pick up his dribble because he's sort of surprised that Strus is defending him like that. And tries to get rid of the ball, and it led to Jimmy Butler's second interception of the fourth quarter in that game 1. And so they're trying to do that matchup hunting thing, right? And we had the crossover with John Corrales, and he called this out. He's like, look, if Tatum and Jaylen Brown can kind of get bogged down in that mismatch hunting, and he was saying like he thinks the Celtics need to be more committed to sort of the ball movement and just getting to certain spots on the floor versus trying to attack individual defenders. And he nailed it, man, because it kind of feels like that's what Tatum is trying to do at the end of these games. And I hate that you keep ragging on Tatum because he's at least scoring points in the first 3 quarters, but Jaylen Brown has basically been a no-show too, completely, like even in all 4 quarters. So both of them are kind of trying to do this, but Max Strus, to Justin's point here, like that has not been the matchup that Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown and those guys, and the same goes across the board, like, underrating a little bit what it is that Caleb Martin can do. Like you said it earlier, but the fact that the Heat's depth has outperformed Boston's depth, which was one of the biggest strengths that they had, right? They have 6th man of the year in Malcolm Brogdon, like all these things. The Knicks' depth was such an important thing for the Knicks in the regular season. Miami's depth outplayed the Knicks' depth in round 2. Right now, in 2 games in the conference finals, Miami's depth has outplayed Boston's depth. And Miami's, obviously, we've already talked about this, but their stars have outplayed Boston's stars. Let's get to some of these listener questions here. Joshua writes in, should Miami play game 3 with a game 7 mentality and start running the Celtics off the 3-point line? Boston has no answer for Bam.
Yes. I think that's pretty obvious. This team fully aware, like what I saw yesterday in game 2 has me convinced. I mean, we've seen it again throughout the playoffs. They have a sense of urgency that they did not have during the regular season. And they don't want to give up any opportunities. They're not satisfied with a 2-0 lead. That seems incredible to say, but I'm sure every player in that Heat locker room right now is so fired up, energized, lockstep, in focus, and wants to be able to close out this series. They're looking for the sweep. As improbable and impossible as that might seem, that's the goal in that Heat locker room. And so they're going to approach game 3 knowing that their backs are against the wall. At least that's the mindset. And they're going to do everything they can to close out this series as soon as possible. And I don't know
it's the biggest difference between the Heat.
But
but it's the biggest difference between the Heat and the Celtics is just that mindset, man. And I hate to just kind of get into the sports cliches of it, but you can't watch these first 2 games. And by the way, I've had this issue with the Celtics for the last couple of years. They seem like you could just rattle them. You can kind of get in their heads. And that, to me, we talked about it going into the series, is can Miami get into Boston's heads early? Can they kind of just do that stuff between the ears where they're just in their heads and they get them rattled? Because they rattled them. I know that they lost in the conference finals last year, but the Celtics were rattled, right? And the Warriors did it to them and ended up winning the finals because they rattled them. By the way, the Celtics, weren't they up 2-0?
Yeah.
They were up 2-1 in that series. Definitely. But yeah, it's just, and it feels like that's happened. And Miami has sort of that just, I'm going to step on your throat and finish this off mentality, right? Like that John Wick mentality. That's what this Miami Heat team has. And the Celtics, like, this isn't new, man. Like, this is just kind of their MO, and this isn't new for the Miami Heat either, right? This is how they got this far in the first place. I have not listened to any Boston sports radio yet, but I can't imagine that it is
it has to be dire.
Very rational right now.
Yeah.
All right, let's do this one. Where do we go? This is interesting. Oscar writes in, are the Heat better without Tyler Herro? How do you think he'll be reintroduced into the lineup? I don't know if he's going to be reintroduced in the lineup. I think that's more obviously related to the broken hand injury. I guess timeline could bring him back if this were to go 7 games. For Game 7, that was sort of the initial 6-week timeline. Maybe he could play in the NBA Finals if the Heat make it that far. But that to me is less interesting because I don't want to play doctor on a podcast. But are the Heat better without Tyler Herro, David?
I think they're not necessarily one-dimensional. Like what he provides in the scoring is somewhat balanced by what he gives up on defense. Even if he's not necessarily per se a bad defender, he's going to get attacked. And I think we'd see Tatum and Brown much more comfortable and being aggressive and trying to hunt Tyler in those mismatches, because Max just seems to be a little bit more dialed in as far as his overall defensive effort. So yeah, I'd say that they're probably better without this version of Tyler here, at least.
Would you have him come off the bench if he does come back?
Yes.
I don't. You would.
I think that's pretty clear.
I think you would have to, just because I don't know what kind of conditioning he would be in. I know he's been able to keep up his conditioning work. It's a broken hand, not a broken foot. So
yeah,
there's some of that, but I don't think he would mess with what's been working either. And that's not even anything against Tyler Herro. I think there's been moments in these playoffs where it feels like he could really use Tyler Herro. There's been moments in these first 2 games,
especially against the Knicks,
felt like that it feels like they could use him too. All right, let's see. What else do we have here? Him again. Do you think Jimmy Butler can win the MVP regardless of what happens? Let's MVP of the Eastern Conference Finals, the Larry Bird Trophy.
Yeah, I think that seems pretty likely at this point. I mean,
if the Heat win, it's going to be his. If there's no way that if the Celtics come back, Jimmy Butler wins that thing, though.
No. Yeah, I mean, I don't even want to look at that far ahead. It's a fine award. And look, more importantly, Jimmy doesn't care. Like, Jimmy does not care. Right now, all he wants to do is win games and crush the souls of Boston Celtics fans and players all over the world. Like, that's just it. That's his only goal, is to go and win the finals.
This comes from US Marines 89. As a Celtics fan, I can admit the Heat are doing a very good job understanding their roles and staying calm. I knew before the series started we would have a hard time facing this team. Good job by the Heat. Thanks for Celtics fans for popping in here.
That's fair.
Really interesting perspective, isn't it? Like, this is the biggest problem I think Celtics fans have. Like, Celtics fans are like, we have all the talent in the world, right? Everybody keeps talking about us as the deepest team, and they are. I think they are the most talented team in the NBA, just looking at the rosters. And yet it's the Heat, it's their coaching too. It just feels like right now through 2 games, David, that the Heat just know how it is that they want to go about playing games in this series. Wins or losses, they know what they want to do. They know how they want to attack Boston. Eric Spoelstra does such a good job of finding like little windows, little weaknesses, little soft spots, and just tearing them open and winning games that way. And it just feels like the Celtics are sort of still searching right now. Like, they don't really it kind of goes back to like the Max Strus point. It's like they thought that was going to be it, and it just hasn't been it. And they're like, well, that's not it. So what's going to be it? Like, how do we? There was no sort of plan B for them. It feels like, and look, if they make more shots, if they shoot what we'd expect the Celtics to shoot, maybe the series does look different. Maybe it is 1-1 at this point, right? But the Heat are up 2-0, and the series is going back to Miami. There's no shoulda, woulda, coulda here. So interesting perspective. Let me see this.
Yeah, I like.
Else?
I like that. Miami has found a way to do something that nobody else has done, to be able to question. Like, these are very big, large sense questions, but what they've been able to accomplish here really kind of changes the way that you perceive sports. And again, the idea of talent and is such a difficult one for me, and has been for a long time. And I remember
you've been consistent on that.
Yeah, it's just so hard to quantify, because like, are we just talking about being high draft choices, about being a little bit more physical? Like, is Jason Tatum a better athlete than Max Strus? Yeah, I think that's fair. Is he a better scorer than Max Strus? Sure, but I mean, Max Strus is coming up with ways to impact the game differently and better. Like, I don't know. It's
when
very
I think about
difficult.
talent, I just think about first of all, pedigree, right? Like, what were you doing in high school? Like, were you the number 1 recruit in your class? Like, ESPN top 100 index kind of high school player. So I think about that, college, just skill work. Like, are you like, how's your handle? Like, how's your touch? Like that stuff that you can't really teach, right? The obviously size, strength, athleticism, jumping, like all that stuff. When you kind of go down the line, like, yeah, the Heat are not a talented team when you kind of consider talent from that perspective. But the thing
They'll
that
outwork you. They'll
stands out,
outwork you. Yeah.
I was listening to what was it, Paul George whatever he calls it, I forget, Paul George's podcast,
Sure.
and he was talking with DeMar DeRozan, and they were talking about how a lot of players in the NBA don't really want it. Right? He says DeMar DeRozan went so far as like there's a lot of players in our league that are sorry. And Paul, 450 players in the NBA on rosters.
Yeah.
Paul George said that number. He's like, what is it, 450? He said 100, 120 of them are really about it. That's a surprising statement. And it got me thinking about this Heat team. And now you could have, there's so many guys who come up, they're the man on their high school team. They're balling out. They go to Kentucky, Kansas,
Duke,
whatever, and they get drafted and they're 6'8" and they can jump through a building and, they jump through the roof, they could dunk, they're doing all these things. All the talent in the world, all just the God-given talent in the world, right? And do they really want it? And I feel like maybe that's where the Heat are. They have found guys who just really want to be here. They found guys who, obviously the 7 undrafted players, but just even like Jimmy Butler and Kyle Lowry and players who were drafted, Tyler Herro, Bam Adebayo, like these guys who you talk to people around them and the stuff that, again, not to get into like the whole pool of sports cliches here, but they work their tails off, man. And they really want to be here. And I do feel like if maybe that's a little bit of a market inefficiency that the Heat have sort of found, and obviously if you could be picking players in the top 10 every year and still win games, you would do that, right? I don't think like you would just do that. But the fact that the Heat have been winning a lot and, 3 conference finals in 4 years, and they do trade a lot of their draft picks and all these things, they've had to find another way to add to their roster. And right now, I think maybe they're finding a market inefficiency. Said, okay, maybe we're not going to get the 6'8" guy who can jump out of the gym, but we're going to find guys who are going to do whatever it takes to stay on an NBA roster. And we feel like that gives us an advantage. Maybe not the ultimate advantage, right? We talk about all we want to talk about. The Heat they're only up 2-0 in the Eastern Conference Finals, and they haven't won a championship with this roster. And Jimmy Butler still doesn't have a ring, so it's not like they're going out winning, making dynasties with this. But they have exploited something, I think, maybe in finding guys who want to be here.
Shout out also, I think, to Kevin Love. Like maybe his play on the court hasn't been great, but the dynamic within the team, like we've seen it up close. We've seen how it's been changing and evolving over the course of the season. And I think he's really provided like a sense of chemistry, camaraderie, togetherness, singular focus on, and just kind of a joy to the locker room that I don't think we saw earlier in the season. Not to criticize Dwayne Dedman and anybody else that was in the locker room, but it seemed like there were some conflicting personalities in the locker room earlier in the season, and that has
just tired,
changed.
Man. Just you found a guy
needed a
who's
spark.
out of the rotation.
We talked about this.
Yeah.
It's the same roster since the bubble, since 2019, with some variations here and there, but mostly the same roster. They didn't make a big trade. They didn't make a big offseason acquisition. You kind of go into the season, there's some frustration. I want mine. I'm not getting mine. I need to compete for this. We've got the same personality. And again, Jimmy can be trying, but that's just his nature. He's going to try and push you to be the very best you can be. And that kind of wears on some people over the course of the season. I get it. But now, again, Kevin comes in and kind of loosens everything up. And it didn't translate during the regular season right away. But I think we're seeing the impact of it slowly kind of creep in there. It's been a really much better locker room.
It kind of reminds me of like, you grow up, maybe your parents have a pool or something, and your friend comes over and his parents don't have a pool, and he comes over and he's just like, wow, you guys have a pool? That's so cool. And you're like, oh yeah, like I guess we do have I never really think about the pool. And it just like that's Kevin Love walking into that locker room out of the rotation in Cleveland. He comes in, he goes, wow, you guys do it this way. This is so great. Like to be around, this kind of organization who's all about winning. And everybody's like, it's been the same group for like 2 years. And they're like, yeah, you know what? I guess it is pretty nice here. I guess we are all about winning. I guess we do have we have the culture thing, like whatever it is. And that's what I think Kevin Love brought to it. It was sort of an appreciation of that. And I do think it was a little bit refreshing. All right. I think we're good here. Yeah. Let's wrap it up. Thanks again.
Hey, shout out to everybody. Shout out to everybody on a Saturday morning. I know there's a lot of happiness around the fan base right now. But it's incredible the support that we've gotten. 600 people on right now, Saturday morning, listening to us talk about a big Game 2 win. So shout out to everybody who's on the show.
Absolutely. We'll be back Sunday night with a recap of Game 3. In the meantime, make sure you're liking the videos on YouTube, subscribe on YouTube, follow us on your favorite podcast app. We're available there as well. David, have a great weekend. Talk to you Sunday night.
You got it, Wes.